Near this site, on the outskirts of Cardiff in this picturesque and quiet village, was the world's worst air disaster. The Welsh have a real relationship with rugby. Whilst I'm not an avid fan, it's hard not to get caught up into the passion and excitement when there's a big game on. On the 12th of March 1950, Wales played Ireland in Belfast for the then Five Nations tournament. A plane was privately chartered for the return trip to Dublin so Welsh rugby fans from South Wales could see the match. The plane was an Avro 205, named Stargirl. There were 78 passengers and 5 crew. The plane had been hired by Harold Dunscombe of Bristol Street Cottays in Cardiff, who organised the trip. There was so much interest in this trip that he did consider hiring 2 planes, but just decided on the one in the end. Passengers paid £10 and 5 shillings for the ticket, and the excitement was palpable. There was even a group photo by the plane to mark this novelty trip. The plane had made a perfect takeoff, and arrived at Dublin just before noon on the Friday before the crash. It was the first of its kind to land at Dublin Airport. Wales won the match with a 6-3 score. This was Wales's 8th Triple Crown win, but their first in 39 years. What a success! The plane took off from Dublin Airport and was headed towards Llandow Aerodrome. Nothing had happened on the outward journey, and there were no known signs of trouble with the plane. The plane had originally been booked for 72 passengers, but had been stripped to accommodate the additional 6. At 3:05 PM, the plane began approaching runway 28 of Llandow Aerodrome. The descent of the plane and the crash itself was witnessed by several people. Eyewitnesses state that the plane was at a very low altitude and had its undercarriage down. The pilot is said to have attempted to counter the plane's low altitude by increasing the engines and bringing the plane up. The plane rose steeply to 100 metres, then stalled and began to plummet towards the ground when about half a mile from its landing site. The right wingtip hit the ground first, followed by the nose of the plane and left wing. The wings separated from the fuselage upon impact. There was no explosion or ground fire. The plane simply came to a stop. The plane is said to have narrowly missed Park Farm, as well as several boys who were playing football nearby. The boys ran to the crash site to help, but found that most of the passengers had already died. The time between passengers getting on the plane to the crash was about 50 minutes. According to the Western Mail, the plane had broken up into hundreds of pieces, with the personal items of passengers strewn around the field. The villagers who rushed to the scene to help recall it being completely silent. The death toll was 80. This includes 75 passengers and all 5 members of the crew. At the time, this was the worst plane crash in world history, with the highest death toll. It remained the worst in Britain until 1972, and is still the worst in Wales. There was only 2 passengers who walked out from the crash unaided. According to police reports, they climbed out through the fabric of the plane. These men had chosen to sit in adjacent seats at the tail of the plane. They had done this solely to have a better view out the windows. But this decision is likely the one that saved their lives. The 2 passengers were Handel Rogers, a 35-year-old ship chandler, and Gwyn Anthony, a 27-year-old schoolteacher. They were brothers-in-law and lived in Llanelli. A third man, Mel Thomas, also survived, but he was knocked unconscious. He was actually in the plane toilet at the time of the impact. He survived but remained in hospital for several months. 8 other passengers survived the initial crash, but later died of their injuries. Pilot, squadron leader William Irving, had previously survived being shot down in North Africa, survived Dunkirk, and completed 2 tours flying Lancaster bombers on 63 missions during World War II. The survivors of the crash stated that there was a surprising sense of quiet and calm before the impact. They did not shout, scream, nor even speak as the plane descended. The scene was attended by 45 ambulances which arrived from Neath, Bridgend, Cardiff, Barry and Swansea. They were later joined by 60 more, as well as the RAF and fire crews who attended in case of a fire. According to police reports, the crash was also witnessed by friends and family of the passengers, who had arrived to pick up their friends and family and in their horror, watched the crash happen. Desperate for information and to check on their loved ones, the witnesses began to head towards the crash site. This was a dangerous thing to do as they began to block the emergency services. There was immediately an investigation into the crash, with officials travelling from as far as London. After the results of the investigation, the Ministry of Aviation declared that the probable cause of the crash was the loading of the aircraft. Due to the plane being stripped to add additional passengers, the plane's centre of gravity shifted. The official line of the cause of the accident was down to incorrect loading, with a conclusion of accidental death. The results of the hearing concluding in a minimal fee to be paid by the airline. The plane was privately chartered for the match and was actually previously banned due to safety concerns. This tragedy is still one that echoes throughout the communities affected today. Family and friends are remembered and the tragedy is still talked about regularly. Several of the passengers killed in the crash were members of their local rugby team, each club marking their lost loved ones through plaques and through their badges. This included 3 members of Abercorn RFC. And since the tragedy, a propeller has been incorporated to their club badge to immortalise the memory of those lost. On the 13th of March 2020, a memorial match was played between Llandow 15 and Monmouthshire County on Welfare Ground in Newbridge to mark the 70th anniversary of the crash. A memorial plaque was placed in the village of Sigginston in 1990 on the 40th anniversary of the crash. The plaque is made of slate from the local quarry at Doweny and was unveiled by 2 survivors, Handel Rogers and Mel Thomas. It reads, "On Sunday the 12th of March 1950, a 2-5 aeroplane returning from Dublin crashed 200 yards from this spot as it approached Llandow Aerodrome. 75 Welsh rugby supporters and 5 crew died. There were just 3 survivors. In Belfast the day before, Wales had won the Triple Crown." Being here at the site of the crash where this tragedy happened all that time ago and how it's still being mourned today is really quite sobering. Yeah, that's it. Amazing. You can easily get in this field. Yeah. Of all the images that document this tragedy, even the ones of the crash itself, the saddest one for me is the group shot by the plane. These are people like you and me, our friends and family, filled with excitement by supporting our nation through rugby and meeting a really tragic and unnecessary end. What a huge loss to Wales and its communities.